Hello, how are you? I was looking to do a quick video on a post that someone I think is pretty smart, a guy called Naval, did, and I had a couple of thoughts on it. So if you haven't seen it, it's a podcast, it's on X, you can go through it. What we're going to do is just have a look at what he is saying in terms of the transcript. I watched it. I think you should too. Let me just increase the size of that a little bit so it's easier to see. So I like Naval. I don't think he's right about everything all the time, but he's pretty smart and his hit rate is above average, to put it mildly. And yeah, I like the guy. I think he's switched on. A lot of what he said in the podcast resonated with me in terms of it mirrored my own journey. And because of that, I think there's value in looking at this. So he starts with saying there was this moment in December 2025 when he could just start to deliver one-shot custom apps. This kind of aligns with my own experience. I think it was sort of September maybe or so when I started to understand how to use Codex. And that was quite a revolutionary moment for me because suddenly it was like, what can you build? Right. I didn't think it was like having a junior programmer because I used it, I think, differently to how a lot of other people use it. So the issue I was having at the time that kind of gave me my breakthrough moment of, this is what it can do, was I was trying to look at our server, our production server. So our production server has PM2 and it has Docker and there's a bunch of different apps on it. And I was trying to understand it more from a security and can we tighten it up? And, do we have all of our DNS entries correct? It was DevOps stuff, right? I wasn't looking to code. And so what I did was I hooked up Codex so that in VS Code, Codex could access all the different services we used, right? So I created a token for GitHub, so it could now see what actions were happening. It was just a personal access token, no drama. Then I hooked up the Google stack. So I created a project on console, gave it ownership permissions. This was like a nice siloed project. And then, told it to create, I added the APIs for Google Analytics, for PageSpeed for Tag Manager. It's a fairly simple process. You create email addresses and then you give those email addresses permissions within the various products, and then you tell the project to have API access to those products. And then I gave it access to Cloudflare and the server. So now that I had these 5 or 6 services, I was able to ask it questions like, hey, look across all of these and tell me what is happening with our cybersecurity. How do we harden it? What does caching look like? PageSpeed is pointing out all these errors. You can see our Nginx setup and what our server looks like. How do I make this better? And that was kind of the aha moment for me. It wasn't so much, it's a junior programmer and now he can give me, an algorithm to solve this particular function. I went at it from the DevOps perspective. And I'm actually really happy I did because the improvements in DevOps have been fantastic. Like our CI/CD now is like an order of magnitude, several orders of magnitude, larger, better, handles things much more nicely. Everything from it'll look on the server, how much space is there, it'll check the DNS and everything is going good, it'll look at errors, it'll tell me if there's errors. It blows me away that more people don't use AI for DevOps. So I never really had this junior develop programmer disposal. This, however, I hadn't coded in a very long time. Like you have staff, they write code, I make calls, annoy people and be like, hey, I can do this project for you, give me money, right? You're prospecting, all of that. And this thing about activation energy that Naval's talking about is actually very valid, because if you don't code for a while, it suddenly becomes a lot harder. You don't really forget it. It's like riding a bike, but it becomes a lot harder to pull off. With vibe coding, it's just a lot of fun. Like, you don't have to remember the silly things. You can just focus on the bits that you care about, and that makes a big difference. He goes into all this stuff about how that works. That's fine. There's this personal app store idea that he talks about, and there is value to this. Every time I look at my phone, I can see, and I'm a little bit vain, so I have these on my main screen, apps that I've built, right? And it's kind of cool. You're like, hey, I made that thing. Well, cool. I really like this idea of video game with real world rewards. I find that I play a lot fewer video games these days, and I really enjoy vibe coding. I'm one of those poor suckers who's got the business account for Codex, so it keeps running out, and because it's a business, you can't really upgrade it to anything sensible. I don't know how that works. So I've got a couple of accounts, and I'll run out of the 5 hour limit in one and switch to the other one. Fine, whatever. But it is actually really good fun. This part, really helps to have a clear direction. And I probably should highlight this. I don't know that it does, because I found, and I don't one-shot apps. I found that you build the thing how you thought about it, and then you realize there's all these other things you didn't think about, and that makes all the difference. So doing it in multiple passes is really good. I remember seeing this thing where now, build a content management system, build a mailing system, build an agentic thing that does something or the other, build a whatever product you're building, right? So we one of our products is videotranslator.ai. It's real-time video calls, but they transcribe and translate and sort of speaks it out, whatever. Being able to build multiple products really quickly is a really enjoyable thing. I built some funny ones. In December 2025, I wanted to see if I could build an app in 3 days. And so I built this thing called Trust PRR, and just tracks your trust, your PRs that you've put up. It was basically a play on Trust MRR, which is actually quite a successful app and all that. I just wanted to see, could I do it? And yeah, you can. It's actually pretty amusing, and it is good fun. I'm very proud of, so if I could show this to you, this is our website for the consulting thing, if you need any consulting. But we went through an interesting transition where first we had this Hugo website that was markdown powered, that was super performant because it was a static site generator. And then we switched to Forestry, which had the benefits of a CMS. And then we moved to Strappy, which had substantially more benefits as a CMS and was able to handle translation much better, because videotranslator.ai is obviously different languages. So we wanted the capability to publish blogs and stuff in different languages. We ended up doing that, not very well, but anyways. But the overhead for maintaining this Strappy, I think it was Gatsby setup, was just terrible. And then Gatsby, I think, kind of died as a project. It was supposed to be an upgrade to Hugo and didn't kind of play out that way. And so at the start of this year, I sort of went, bugger it. I'm just going to build my own CMS from scratch. And I'm also going to put in some of the emailing capability into the CMS. And it's brilliant. Like on PageSpeed it's amazing. It's blazingly fast. It's super optimized. It does exactly what we need, right? Which is really nice. It's an app, and it has a public-facing website like CMS. But yeah, it was fantastic. So you can have lots of different apps, and you can have fun building them, and the quality of the apps increases the more you build, because you get more of an idea of how it works and things like that. So I'm really happy about that. But anyways, this clear direction, you kind of don't, like it's hard to have a clear direction sometimes. This is really true. We had this with Video Translator. It hasn't kind of made the money we'd hoped. It's a good product. We should try it. But anyways, we had a couple of engineers. We worked pretty hard for a long time, but it didn't really work out that well. And now every time I feel like I kind of go in, or one of my guys goes in, and we vibe code it a little bit nicer. Every couple of weeks it gets a little bit of a polish and does something nicer, and that's pretty cool. Um, this is something I do with clients these days because they will often say, okay, how do we do this? And I'll say, look, why don't you guys just sit down, and I'll sit down and we'll spend like 3 hours and we'll like just play with it and make it look like you want it to. Because when I build it, obviously I have an idea in my head, and then you have a different idea in your head, and there isn't really a lot of value in trying to explain that to me. It's really hard, right? You're much better off with me just sitting and building it in front of you, and you go, well, what about this other thing and this other thing? And yes, there is some scope creep, and I can push back on that, but it's a much more collaborative approach, and it makes the gaps a lot more real for the client. So when we do consulting, that's how we work, and it's actually a really enjoyable process because by the end of it, the client has seen you build this thing for reals. They know what you're doing. They're a lot happier to pay you, but they also understand the limitations. And I think there's a certain joy in being involved with the process if you're a client. But hey, yeah, there's nobody standing in between you and your prototype. Uh, I really like that line. And I think while that's not entirely true for most people and most clients, I guess the distance from the user of the product to the person who can build the product is a lot smaller, which I think is a win because it speeds up the entire process. Yeah, this renaissance for individual software creators really, I thought that was quite amusing. And you know how you have indie game devs? I suppose now you have indie SaaS devs, I guess. I don't know about this pure software becoming uninvestable. I mean, maybe not. I don't really have an opinion on it, but I think it's a bit of a clickbait, maybe. I don't know. There was a bunch of stuff here, and kids vibe coding and things like that. I mean, maybe I'm not entirely sure. Uh, I'm sure he's seeing a lot of things I'm not, so that's fine. A place for each model. This is true. I really like this idea of jagged intelligence because it's absolutely true. So my marketing guys use Claude more because it's nicer in terms of designs and things it puts together. The dev team is very heavily on Codex, um, and maybe that changes in the future, but that's how it is at the moment. Gemini is fantastic at YouTube and search kind of stuff, which Naval calls out, but it's also fantastic at writing emails. I don't especially know what the implication of this is for you and your privacy of your Gmail account, but hey, I'm just saying it's really good at writing emails. Um, which is all true, like I haven't used Grok. I mean, maybe I should give it a shot. Um, but I haven't really used Grok. This eager to please is true. We're building this thing called Speech Lobster, right? And it teaches you how to speak in a different language. It's an agentic version of that. It's an open claw implementation of how you can speak in a different language. And if you kind of don't want to work with the AI, it's super easy to confuse it and just it goes nowhere. It's kind of funny actually. I think the actually here I think we should just re-architect that whole thing. That's true because as you flesh out the ideas you want, you'll find that the surface area of your app, so if you think about it in terms of different pages that you navigate between, some of the pages become a lot larger than the other pages for obvious reasons. And then you really have to think about how to break this up because once a page is several thousand lines of code, making changes to it is quite a fragile process, right? You'll fix one thing and you'll break something else. You're better off re-architecting it, which we do fairly regularly and works quite well. But yeah, it's something to really be aware of in terms of vibe coding, because the limitations of the context window relative to the size of the thing you're trying to do, very real problem. And I think that's okay, because I think adding good architecture is one of those places where AIs kind of really aren't, because it's a hard thing to explain, but it's more like I feel like this is messy, or this is not getting me the kind of quality I would like to see in my software. And the reason for it is we should re-architect the code, make it a lot smaller, because it'll be easier to measure different parts of it and see what's wrong. It's one of those things. The model is always trying to please you to a hilarious extent, but it's an amazing tool, all said and done. I didn't get a lot of this why math and coding. I didn't get a lot out of this. Um, I agree with the point. I mean, people have been talking about this for a while, right? Like, the only problem is intelligence. If you can solve the problem of making AI smarter, you can solve anything else. And the way you solve the problems of making AI smarter is you get this generation of AIs to develop the next generation of AIs. Okay, cool. I'd be amused if we get to a point where apps basically get rebuilt every 6 months with the latest frontier model. I think that would be kind of funny. I don't know it'll get there, and I don't know it needs to get there, but you would think that if the AI is getting substantially better every 6 months, it's able to pick up more architectural stuff that should be done a certain way. I guess in some ways it's a throwback to sort of Rails, where Ruby on Rails, where it's like you have this one super opinionated way of doing this one thing, which is RESTful behavior from a database. And Rails is really good at doing that because it's super opinionated in how it wants you to do it. Maybe that's what happens with different components inside a piece of software, where after eventually enough playing with it, you know what's going on and the best way to do it. Maybe. Beginning of the end of Apple's dominance. I mean, yeah. I think his point actually makes it right at the end, where this bit. So let me mark that. Windows or Microsoft fell behind because they kind of missed the mobile phone boat, and that hampered them for a decade. And maybe Apple is missing the AI boat, and that's going to hamper them for a decade. I mean, sure, that's a reasonable argument. Makes sense. I'm not an investment advisor, so I don't really have any opinions on that. I don't know that it makes that much of a difference from the point of view of a vibe coder or founder or whatever, but it's a valid point, I suppose. This is pretty interesting. We've tried to do this a couple of different ways. I don't necessarily know that it works as well as you'd hope, because it relies on folks knowing what a bug is and knowing to tag it as a bug. And maybe that's possible in agentic voice systems, right? But I'm not yet convinced that that's the case. Users often just don't understand what happened and what failed, and will just leave in frustration, as opposed to trying to work it out and then saying, okay, I should report this as a bug. I mean, maybe you put that in for a very small minority of people who just love your product and use it every day. Okay. But yeah, I mean, we tried some similar things. I don't know that we've done a very good job of it, but nonetheless. The second thing, agents can do perfect customer service. I mean, maybe. We found this to be a lot harder in practice than it is in theory, which I guess is kind of always the case. It's quite easy to confuse AIs, and it's not entirely apparent what the best architecture is. So when you think about agents, there's two pieces to it. There's the piece where you have the linkage to, GPT real-time mini or whatever, right? Or GPT real-time 1.5, whatever. And that's actually having the conversation. Now, those are multimodal, so you can send them audio plus a bit of text, right? And the bit of text is pushing them in certain directions. So you generally have a second AI that is looking at the transcript of what happened and evaluating it against the goals of what that interaction is, right? So that it's two AIs working in tandem. And so what you have to do is then the extractor AI as opposed to the real-time GPT AI. So real-time GPT AI is the one that's actually talking. The extractor AI is generally GPT-5 or something. It's just doing text. And it's looking at your transcript on a turn basis and then going, I should do this, I should do that. And then it's telling real-time GPT to do it. And that's how you sort of control the conversation. It's a lot harder to do in practice than it is in theory. A couple of reasons for this. The big one is often conversations just have to mosey a little bit, right? Which means what should the extractor send at that time? And the answer is nothing particularly. Okay, cool. But yeah, I think we're still a bit away from this. But the bigger points are valid, and well worth a read if you are interested in this kind of thing, or well worth a listen or watch. It's on YouTube and stuff. But I hope you found what I said kind of useful, and let me know if you have any feedback.